So we're back in the Talmud, Avodah Zarah, Daf 68. So at the end of 67, it says, the Gemara asks him, what is the reasoning of Rabbi Shimon? It is, as it is taught in a Baraita, that from the verse, quote, you shall not eat of any unslaughtered animal carcass, you may give it to the resident alien, or the ger, who is within your gates, that he may eat it. Deuteronomy 14:21. It is derived that with regard to animal carcasses, anything that is fit for a ger toshav to consume is called an unslaughtered carcass and is forbidden. And now we're in 68. And any carcass that is unfit even for a ger toshav to consume, or is one that turned rancid and is unfit for consumption, is not called an unslaughtered carcass with regard to its prohibition. I do want to point out, whenever it says carcass, it doesn't mean that it's just like roadkill or something necessarily. I mean, it could be, but it's basically an animal that is not ritually slaughtered, or it might have been ritually slaughtered but found to be inappropriate. So that would be considered a carcass in that case. Nevela. And what can Rabbi Meir respond to this? He could say that verse is written to exclude meat that was rancid at the outset. That is, that was not fit for consumption even before the animal's death due to a defect in the animal. By contrast, a carcass that was fit for consumption when the animal died and was consequently rendered forbidden remains forbidden even when it becomes rancid. And Rabbi Shimon could counter that meat that was rancid at the outset does not need specific exclusion by the verse, as it is considered as mere dust and does not fall under the category of an unslaughtered animal carcass. Ula says this dispute between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Shimon is with regard to a forbidden food that enhanced the flavor of a dish when it fell into it and subsequently detracted from its flavor. In this case, Rabbi Meir deems the dish forbidden, since the forbidden food enhanced its flavor at the outset. But in a case of forbidden food that detracted from the flavor of the dish at the outset, everyone agrees that it is permitted. Rav Chaga raised an objection to the opinion of Ula from a Baraita. Forbidden wine that fell into lentils or forbidden vinegar that fell into split beans renders the food forbidden, and Rabbi Shimon deems them permitted. But here is a case where the forbidden food detracted from the flavor of the dish at the outset, and the Tanaim disagree. So the Tanaim are from the Mishnah. So Ula said, Chaga does not know what the sages say, yet he raises an objection? Here we are dealing with a case where the vinegar fell into the cold split beans and one subsequently heated them, in which case it becomes like a forbidden food that enhanced the flavor of the mixture and subsequently detracted from it, as vinegar enhances the flavor of cold split beans, and it is consequently forbidden according to Rabbi Meir. And Rabbi Yochanan says, the dispute between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Shimon is with regard to a case where the forbidden food detracts from the flavor of the permitted food from the outset. A dilemma was raised before the sages. Does Rabbi Yochanan mean that the dispute is with regard to a case where the forbidden food detracts from its flavor from the outset, but if it enhanced it at first and subsequently detracted from it, everyone agrees that it is forbidden? Or perhaps he means that the dispute is both in this case and in that case. The Gemara comments, the dilemma shall stand unresolved. So Rav Amram said, is it possible that there is substance to the statement of Rabbi Yochanan, that there is disagreement with regard to a case where the forbidden food detracts from the flavor of the permitted food from the outset, but it is not taught in the Mishnah? So Rav Amram went out, examined the Mishnah, and discovered that this dispute is taught in a Mishnah, so Orla 2:8, in the case of non-sacred leaven that fell into the dough, and there is enough of it to cause the dough to become leavened, and the dough indeed became leavened, and subsequently leaven of terum, or leaven of forbidden diverse kinds planted in a vineyard fell into this dough, and there is enough of it to cause the dough to become leavened. The dough is forbidden, because the forbidden leaven is considered to have contributed to the process of the leavening. But Rabbi Shimon deems the dough permitted because the additional leaven has a negative impact on the dough, which was already leavened. So Rav Amram comments, but here it is a case where the forbidden substance detracted from the flavor of the dough at the outset, and Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Shimon disagree, as a Mishnah that is not attributed explicitly to a Tana represents the opinion of Rabbi Meir. So Rabbi Zera said, Dough is different because even if the additional leaven is detrimental to its flavor, in any event the dough is enhanced since it is suitable for leavening several other batches of dough with it. The more it is leavened, the more it is enhanced in terms of this purpose. So the Gemara suggests another source for the statement of Rabbi Yochanan. Come and hear that which is taught in a Braita. In the case of leaven of teruma, a non-sacred leaven that fell into the dough, if this one was sufficient to cause the dough to become leavened, and that one was sufficient to cause the dough to become leavened, and they both cause the dough to become leavened, it is forbidden. So Rabbi Shimon deems it permitted. If the leaven of teruma fell in first, everyone agrees that it is forbidden. If the non-sacred leaven fell in first, and subsequently the leaven of teruma, or of diverse kinds that were planted in a vineyard, fell in, this is also forbidden, but Rabbi Shimon deemed it permitted. The Gemara comments, but here it is a case where the forbidden substance detracted from the flavor of the dough from the outset, and they disagree. And if you would say, here too, this can be examined in accordance with the explanation of Rabbi Zera that dough is different because it is enhanced in any event. Come and hear a refutation of that explanation from the latter clause of the same Baraita. Forbidden wine that fell into lentils or forbidden vinegar that fell into split beans renders the food forbidden. And Rabbi Shimon deems them permitted. And here also it is a case where the forbidden substance detracted from the flavor of the dough from the outset, and they disagree. And if you would say, here too, it can be explained as Ula responded to Rabbi Chaga, that the Baraita is referring to a case where the vinegar enhanced the flavor of the split beans and subsequently detracted from it. That is where it spilled into cold split beans and they were heated. This cannot be said as they do they actually disagree in a case where the forbidden substance enhanced the flavor of the permitted food and subsequently detracted from it. But isn't it taught in the first clause of the Baraita that if the leaven of teruma fell in first, before the non-sacred leaven, everyone agrees that it renders the dough forbidden, as it enhanced the flavor of the dough at the outset, even though the flavor was subsequently detracted from by the non-sacred leaven. Rather, one must not conclude from it that the dispute is with regard to a case where the forbidden substance detracted from the flavor of the food from the outset. The Gemara affirms, conclude from it that this is so. The Gemara asks, with regard to those three clauses that the Braita teaches concerning different cases, why do I need all three of them? Granted, the last clause concerning the wine spilling into the lentils teaches us that the dispute is with regard to a case where the forbidden substance detracts from the flavor of the food from the outset. The middle clause, with regard to the case where the leaven of teruma fell in first, also teaches a novel halacha, which is that in the case of a forbidden substance that enhanced the flavor of the food and subsequently detracted from it, everyone agrees that the mixture is forbidden. But why do I need the first clause? Concerning the case of non-sacred leaven and leaven of teruma falling into the dough together, it could have been inferred from the other two clauses that the dough is forbidden in the following manner. Now that in the case of the last clause, where the forbidden substance does not enhance the permitted food at all, the rabbis deem it forbidden. Is it necessary to say that it is forbidden in the first clause, where the forbidden substance enhances the food's flavor at the first before detracting from it? So Abaye said the first clause is necessary to teach that Rabbi Shimon deems it permitted. And this is what the rabbis said to Rabbi Shimon. This dough was fit to become leavened in 2 hours if the permitted leaven had fallen into it alone. What caused it to become leavened in 1 hour? The forbidden leaven. Therefore the dough is forbidden. And Rabbi Shimon could respond that when the two types of leaven enhanced the flavor of the dough, they both enhanced it. Not only the forbidden leaven, and when they subsequently detracted from it, they both detracted from it. Therefore it is permitted. The Gemara asks, even according to the opinion of Rabbi Shimon, let the permitted leaven and the forbidden leaven combine together and render the dough forbidden, since Rabbi Shimon concedes that if the permitted food was initially enhanced by the forbidden substance, it is forbidden. So the Gemara responds, Rabbi Shimon conforms to his standard line of reasoning, as he says that even a forbidden substance and another forbidden substance do not combine to render a mixture forbidden. Accordingly, a forbidden substance and a permitted substance certainly do not. The Gemara comments, this is, as we learned in a Mishnah, Me'ilah 18a, if orla and diverse kinds planted in a vineyard fell into a permitted substance, and neither one is sufficient in its own quantity to render the mixture forbidden, they combined to render it forbidden if together they are of sufficient quantity. So Rabbi Shimon says they do not combine, and each forbidden substance is treated individually. Here too, since when the forbidden leaven enhanced the dough, it was not sufficient to enhance it by itself. The permitted leaven does not combine with it to render the dough forbidden. The Gemara recounts an incident involving a certain mouse that fell into a barrel of beer. Rav deemed that the barrel of beer forbidden. The sages said before Rav Sheshet, shall we say that Rav maintains that even in a case where the forbidden substance imparts flavor to the detriment of the mixture, it is forbidden? Presumably the mouse imparted flavor to the detriment of the beer. Okay, Rav Sheshet said to them, Rav generally maintains that in a case where the forbidden substance imparts flavor to the detriment of the mixture, it is permitted. But here, in the case of a mouse, it is a novelty that the Torah prohibits the flavor from a mouse at all, as it is repulsive, and people distance themselves from consuming it, and even so, the merciful one prohibits it. Therefore, although it imparts flavor to the detriment of the mixture, it is still forbidden. The sages said to Rav Sheshet, if that is so, that the halacha with regard to a mouse is considered a novelty and is therefore understood to be more stringent than the norm, then a dead mouse should impart ritual impurity, whether it is moist or dried out. Why did we learn in Mishnah, Nida 54b, that carcasses of creeping animals impart impurity when they are moist, but not impart impurity when they are dried out? So Rav Sheshet responded, and according to your reasoning, in which you compare the halachot of ritual impurity to forbidden foods, then with regard to semen, which is also repulsive, it should impart impurity whether moist or dried out. Why do we learn in a Mishnah, Nida 54b, that semen imparts impurity when it is moist, but it does not impart impurity when it is dried out? Rather, what have you to say with regard to the ritual impurity? The merciful one states, the flow of seed, Leviticus 15:16, meaning that the reference is to semen that is fit to fertilize. Here too, with regard to the ritual impurity of a mouse, the verse states, when they have died, Leviticus 11:32. The merciful one states that the carcasses of creeping animals impart impurity only when they are similar to their state at the time of their death. That is, when they are still moist. Therefore, there is no contradiction to the claim that the prohibition against eating a mouse is a novelty and consequently applies even when it detracted from the flavor of the food into which it fell. So Rav Shimi of Nahardea objects to the assumption that a mouse is repulsive. And is it repulsive, he says? But isn't it served at a table of kings and considered a delicacy? So Rav Shimi of Nahardea said in clarification, this is not difficult. This statement that a mouse is served as a delicacy is stated with regard to a field mouse, and that statement that is repulsive is stated with regard to a city mouse. So Rava said the halacha is that if the forbidden substance imparts flavor to the detriment of the mixture, it is permitted. But with regard to a mouse that fell into a barrel of beer, I do not know what the reason was that Rav deemed it forbidden. I do not know whether it was because he maintains that if the forbidden substance imparts flavor to the detriment of the mixture, it is forbidden, and if so, the halacha is not in accordance with his opinion, or whether it was because, although he maintains that if the forbidden substance imparts flavor to the detriment of the mixture, it is permitted, a mouse that falls into beer enhances its flavor. So a dilemma was raised before the sages, and that is the end of Daf 68.